What is up, boys? Today I will be talking about my predictions on Jack Eichel. This will probably be my final video on Jack Eichel until he gets traded. So let's talk about my predictions. Elliot Freeman 2 days ago came on NHL Network and discussed the current status of Jack Eichel and the trade talks that there are. And he did seem to believe that it has narrowed down to two teams. I will be naming those two teams later on in the video. We'll go one by one just to keep the aspect of surprise in, but he did say that the Kings and the Ducks have backed down from the trade negotiations, most likely because they thought that the price was too high to acquire a guy like Eichel, and so they backed down. They're no longer in the negotiations, but there are two teams that it has narrowed down to. This is huge news. Now we can finally make our final mock draft or mock trade, predictions on where he will land, and at the end of the video I will tell you where I personally think he will land out of those two teams. So, the first team of those two are the New York Rangers. So, looking at the New York Rangers' current situation, they have $23 million in projected cap space and current cap space. So, they have a lot of money that they could use to spend and to acquire guys that like Eichel that have $10 million annual cap hits. They also have picks throughout all the way stacked up on 2021, 22, and 23. They're only missing two picks out of all of those 3 years, and they stacked up on fourth rounders and more, another extra third and an extra fourth. So they have a lot that they can spend. And if we look at their roster, they're a relatively young core, and they do have a top line center in Mika Zibanejad, but if you ask me, Mika Zibanejad cannot do the things that Jack Eichel can do. They're both, I think, in my opinion, have the skill, the pure skill to be top line centers. But obviously, in my opinion, Jack Eichel is way better at that position. So let's look at a mock trade that I came up with that I think makes sense for the New York Rangers, and that is Alexander Georgiev, Ryan Strome, Anthony Bietto, and a 2022 first for Buffalo, and in exchange, Jack Eichel to the Rangers. Buffalo did say they want a prospect. They get that in Georgiev. They said they wanted a top six forward. They get that in Strome. They said they wanted a defenseman. They get Anthony Bietto, and then they wanted a first. You get a 2022 first round pick via New York. So, looking at the lineup now for the Rangers after this is still with $20.6 million in cap space. Their lineup is looking like with a first line of Artemi Panarin, Jack Eichel, and Capo Caco. That's going to grow Caco and develop him great, playing alongside of two star players with a 1-2 punch in Jack Eichel and Artemi Panarin. They can produce a lot of points next to each other. And then for the second line, you have Alexis Lafreniere, Mika Zibanejad, and Vitaly Kravtsov, two young guys. And then the point-producing stud, Mika Zibanejad. We know Zibanejad, he has his nights where he goes off. He produces a lot of points when it comes to the end of those 82 games of the season. So I trust him to grow and develop with Alexis Lafreniere and Kravtsov. And then the third line has two holes that you need to fill on the fourth line, but your third line does have Chris Kreider, Colin Blackwell, Julian Gauthier, and then one spot on the fourth line does have Kevin Rooney. In terms of the defensive core, you still have a pretty good defense. You have Ryan Lindgren and Adam Fox on your first pair, K-Andre Miller and Jacob Trouba on your second pair, and Zachary Jones on your third pair. You can figure out who you want to play alongside of him. And if you just get Shesterkin back as your starter goaltender in that tandem for next year with Keith Kincaid, I think it looks really good for you. I think it makes sense. And again, with still $20.6 million that they can use to acquire better improvements for their bottom six, maybe some better defensive core, or maybe a different goalie instead of Shesterkin if they can't get something there. But overall, I think it makes sense. I think the mock trade looks good for Buffalo and it looks good for New York. I think it's just the WW both way. But now, the second team is actually the Minnesota Wild. So the Wild actually have $26.2 million in cap space as of right now. They are stacked up on draft picks 21, 22, and 23. As you can see, they have two firsts in 2021. And if we look at their roster, again, they have the assets that they can use. They have good enough assets to use to trade away and acquire some guys that are stud like Jack Eichel. So if we look at the mock trade I did end up coming up with, that is Marco Rossi, Matt Dumba, Ryan Hartman, and a 2020 first rounder via Minnesota in exchange for Jack Eichel. Again, this looks good for Buffalo. They get everything that they asked for. See, Buffalo said they either want a top 6 forward and a defenseman, or a top 4 defenseman and a forward that's middle 6. They get that in the New York trade, and they especially get that in the Buffalo trade. Even if Buffalo wants a 2021 first rounder instead of 2022, Minnesota can supply that. I just thought by at this point, with the entry draft like 2 days away, it just makes more sense to head away with a 2022 first round pick, and then the Minnesota Wild acquire that star center that they were looking for. If you look at their lineup, they have good wingers in Jordan Greenway, Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Zuccarello, Marcus Foligno, Kevin Fiala, who's not re-signed right now, but if they do re-sign him, which they most likely will, and then he's another great top 6 winger, but they lack center spot. They have Joel Eriksson Ek, who's a good top 6 center, but I don't think he's necessarily, in my opinion, ready for top line center minutes. So what about a guy like Jack Eichel, $10 million cap hit, playing alongside of Kaprizov as that 1-2 punch goal scoring man, assist man? That 1-2 punch works beautiful on that first line, alongside of Zuccarello, and then all your other guys that are younger and can develop. You can probably put Fiala on that second line with Eriksson Ek and Greenway. That's a beautiful line right there. And then you figure out your bottom 6. They have 3 empty spots in the bottom 6 and 3 defense spots empty in the defensive core. They have $16.4 million to work with in cap space, but I do personally think that will drain away pretty quickly, just because if you look at it, there's a lot of empty spots. They're going to have to figure out 3 defensemen, so that's probably going to cut down to like $8 million. Then they have to figure out 3 bottom 6 spots, so that's going to cut down to like $5 million. And then they're going to definitely have to save. They're going to have to trade a guy eventually like Jonas Brodin or Jared Spurgeon, just so they can pay that $14 million in dead cap. But I will say, after looking over the Minnesota Wild and the New York Rangers, I have to give my prediction on who I think he will go to more, and I think it's most likely that Jack Eichel does land in Minnesota. If you asked me, just looking at the trades, if you told me the Minnesota trade for Eichel, and then you told me the New York trade for Eichel, I'd say they're both great, but I would rather take Marco Rossi, Matt Dumba, Ryan Hartman, and a first than Alexander Georgiev, Ryan Strome, Anthony Bietto, and a 2022 first. In my opinion, the trade with Minnesota to Buffalo is just a lot better. It gives you more assets, better assets. Matt Dumba is still young. Marco Rossi is very, very young. Better, more talent prospect than Alexander Georgiev. You're getting more from Matt Dumba than Ryan Strome, and then Ryan Hartman over Anthony Bietto probably, and then you get those 2 first. So obviously, in my opinion, if I was Buffalo and I got offered this from Minnesota and this from New York, I would definitely take Minnesota. Plus, if we were looking at what makes sense more, just the fact, like, tell me when a GM like Bill Guerin, when does a GM actually make a move where they risk $14 million in dead cap for the years 2023 and 24? 2 years in a row, $14 million in dead cap that they have to pay off both of those seasons. Tell me when a GM does that, and then don't expect that they're making a big move. Like, it's obvious that they're gonna do something big. You don't drop Ryan Suter and Zach Parise on the same day, buy them out, and then just not expect a big move. Those guys had huge, hefty contracts. They knew exactly what they were doing looking at that buyout prices for the next couple years. They know what they're gonna do is they're gonna acquire a guy like Jack Eichel. If not Jack Eichel, any guy that's like $10 million in cap hit. And then after, for like, they're gonna go for it. They're gonna go for it either this coming season or the year after. They're gonna go all in, and they're actually just gonna try to win in probably 2022 or 23. They're just gonna go all in, and I honestly think they can do it. I think they can make the Final Four. I think they can make the finals. It's unlikely that they win with this core unless people like Greenway, Fiala, Eriksson Ek, Zuccarello, Foligno really step up and even play better, because they're not playing bad. But if they're going to win the cup with this core, they're going to have to play better than what they are. They're going to have to trade away a lot of their picks, pick up some guys that are on cheap contracts but very highly valued. So I honestly just think the Wild are looking to go all in. Seriously, I mean they found themselves so lucky getting a guy like Kaprizov out of the KHL and just playing amazing in the NHL. I think it's a no-brainer at this point that it's gonna be Minnesota. And it's not that the New York situation doesn't make sense. Not that I don't like Eichel in a Ranger uniform, because I actually kind of do, but it just doesn't make as much sense. Like I seriously think that Guerin has like basically guaranteed himself either getting fired or acquiring Eichel and winning, because if he doesn't get Eichel and he just did all that dead cap buyout for nothing, oh god no, oh dear no, that's bad. Because I don't, as of what I remember, there's not any top line center stud in free agency. So what are you gonna do, huh? What are you gonna do? Exactly. So that's it for this one, boys. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments on my mock trades and which one you personally think makes more sense between Minnesota and the Rangers. Also, I will mention that I am going to be live streaming my reaction to the NHL expansion draft tonight with the Seattle Kraken. I'll be linking my Twitch down below so you can watch that live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So, again, let me know your thoughts down below, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.